Okay, so this is my annotation of chapter 3. Dr. Jekyll was quite at ease. So the first time we come across Dr. Jekyll, he's going to be quite at ease. And ease obviously means like relaxed and calm, which is obviously quite different perhaps to how we've heard about him. We've heard that he was quite wild in his youth so far, but he's going to be quite at ease when we meet him in this chapter, this very short chapter. So a fortnight later, time has moved on. So it jumps 2 weeks. By excellent good fortune, the doctor gave one of his pleasant dinners to some 5 or 6 old cronies, like friends, all intelligent, reputable men, and all judges of good wine. So respectable men, and they're all good judges of good wine. So they all know the finer things in life. And Mr. Utterson so contrived that he remained behind after the others had departed. This was no new arrangement, but a thing that had befallen many scores of times. Where Utterson was liked, he was liked well. Good little quote there about Utterson. You know, again, just hammering home and emphasising how well liked he is as a character. Hosts loved to detail the dry lawyer when the light-hearted and the loose-tongued had already their foot on the threshold. They liked to sit a while in his unobtrusive company. So he's unobtrusive. He doesn't ask too many kind of probing questions. He's like a listener. He isn't a talker as such. Practicing for solitude, sobering their minds in the man's rich silence. So it's this rich silence there. You know, it's his silence is like a warm one after the expense and strain of gaiety. To this rule, Dr. Jekyll was no exception. And as he now sat on the opposite side of the fire, a large, well-made, smooth-faced man of 50, with something of a slyish cast perhaps, but every mark of capacity and kindness. Some lovely quotes here for Jekyll. Okay, so put a little asterisk there about this is a description of Jekyll. So we've got that he's large, he's well-made, he's smooth-faced. We've got all these kind of adjectives to describe him. He's 50 years old. There's something a bit sly about him. Cast is a bit about his kind of like expression, but every mark of capacity would be like generosity, really. Let's put a little note there: generosity and kindness. You could see by his looks that he cherished for Mr. Utterson a sincere and warm affection. So Jekyll and Utterson, there's a warm affection, friendship between them. I have been wanting to speak to you, Jekyll, began the latter. You know that will of yours, so he decides to bring up the will straight away. A close observer might have gathered that the topic was distasteful, but the doctor carried it off gaily. So this is kind of perhaps a distasteful thing to be talking about after dinner in respectable Victorian society. This is like talking about business, you know, after a social meal. It's not quite the right thing to be done, but Jekyll's fine about it. My poor Utterson, said he, you are unfortunate in such a client. I never saw a man so distressed as you were by my will, unless it were that hide-bound pedant Lanyon at what he called my scientific heresies. Okay, so he says about how distressed Utterson was about the will. And then he talks about Lanyon. Hide-bound is about his kind of like his big leather books that he's been reading. And a pedant is someone who's really like nitpicky. Teachers are often pedantic about, I don't know, about spelling and stuff like that, or telling you about you must have your tie on or whatever. That's quite pedantic. So they're describing Lanyon as pedantic, as being really nitpicky. What he called my scientific heresies. This is another good little quote. Heresy is kind of like when you kind of have beliefs that go against kind of religion. So he's calling his Jekyll's beliefs to be these scientific like blasphemies, like heresies, things that go against the word of God. Oh, I know he's a good fellow. You needn't frown. Interestingly, there we know that Utterson has been frowning. So Utterson frowns at this kind of criticism of Lanyon. An excellent fellow, and I always mean to see more of him, but a high-bound pedant for all that. So he repeats about how he's a pedant. An ignorant, blatant pedant. Repeats it 3 times. I was never more disappointed in any man than Lanyon. So clearly we get the other side now of the argument. We get Jekyll's perspective on why they fell out. You know, I never approved of it, pursued Utterson, ruthlessly disregarding the fresh topic. So he kind of wants to get back to the will. He doesn't want to talk about Lanyon, and he's quite ruthlessly doing that. Another little adverb there that tells us how he's communicating. My will? Yes, certainly, I know that, said the doctor, a trifle sharply. Again, another adverb, sharply. So Jekyll's a little bit sharp about this will, doesn't want to talk about it. You have told me so. Well, I will tell you so again, continued the lawyer. I've been learning something of young Hyde, and he brings up Hyde. The large, handsome face of Dr. Jekyll grew pale to the very lips. So Jekyll, on hearing the name, he grows pale, and this indicates fear. He's frightened. I think an interesting thing as well is that if you remember that Hyde too. Move the camera. Hyde too was described as pale and dwarfish in the previous chapter. Move on to the next page. And there came a blackness about his eyes. So there's something dark in his eyes. Again, it's like a fear, perhaps, of Hyde. I do not care to hear more, said he. This is a matter I thought we had agreed to drop. What I heard was abominable, said Utterson. So abominable is kind of like disgusting, shameful. What I heard was shameful. It can make no change. You do not understand my position, returned the doctor, with a certain incoherency of manner. So he's slightly incoherent, a little bit. He's kind of disturbed a bit by this. I am painfully situated, Utterson. My position is a very strange one. So he's about to say more, but he doesn't, and that little hyphen is like a little pause there, that dash. A very strange one. It is one of those affairs that cannot be mended by talking. So Jekyll's giving us some little clues about what's going on, but we still don't get any answers. Jekyll, said Utterson, you know me. I am a man to be trusted. Okay, again, Stevenson hammering home just how reliable Utterson is out of all the characters in the book. Make a clean breast of this in confidence, and I make no doubt I can get you out of it. So Utterson's like, look, tell me the truth, and I can get you out of this, right? I can solve it. My good Utterson, said the doctor, this is very good of you. This is downright good of you. So, he says very, then he says downright. He thinks that Utterson is a good man for trying to help him. And I cannot find words to thank you in. I believe you fully. I would trust you before any man alive. I, before myself. So Jekyll, interesting thing he says there, I would trust you out of anyone else in the world, even myself, if I could make the choice. But indeed, it isn't what you fancy. It is not so bad as that. And just to put your good heart at rest, I will tell you one thing. The moment I choose, I can be rid of Mr. Hyde. Okay, so Jekyll claims that if he wants to get rid of him out of his life, he can do it whenever he chooses. And this is going to be, I'm just going to ask a little question of this. Can he? Because he's been quite confident there, but actually is he as confident as he thinks? I give you my hand upon that, and I thank you again and again, and I will just add one little word, Utterson, that I'm sure you'll take in good part. This is a private matter, and I beg of you to let it sleep. That's almost a warning, isn't it? This is a private matter, I don't want to talk about it, let it go. Utterson reflected a little, looking in the fire. I have no doubt you are perfectly right, he said, at last, getting to his feet. An interesting look into the fire there, isn't there? Utterson almost, he doesn't say straight away that I will let this sleep. He doesn't want to let this go. This is Utterson's big mystery to solve. Well, but since we have touched upon this business, and for the last time, I hope, continued the doctor, there is one point I should like you to understand. I have really a very great interest in poor Hyde. So he says that he has an interest in this guy, and he calls him poor, not poor financially, but just like he feels sorry for him. I know you've seen him. He told me so. So the events of the last chapter in the last 2 weeks, Hyde has told Jekyll about it, and I fear he was rude. So he says, I worry that he was rude to you, but I do sincerely take a very great interest in that young man. just this real closeness between Jekyll and Hyde that we don't yet know why, but just this really close association between the two. And if I am taken away, Utterson, I wish you to promise me that you will bear with him and get his rights for him. I think you would if you knew all, and it would be a weight of my mind if you would promise. So he's asking him to promise, please look after Hyde if something happens to me. He says, if I am taken away, like, it's a strange thing for someone to say. It's like, if I go missing, it almost like implies Jekyll's fears that he will somehow go missing from his relationship somehow with Hyde. I can't pretend that I shall ever like him, said the lawyer. So Utterson's like, no, I can't be friends with him. It's a good little quote, actually. He can't even fake it. He can fake it with other people, but not with him. I don't ask that, pleaded Jekyll, laying his hand upon the other's arm. He even touches him, something we perhaps wouldn't see in kind of Victorian society. He puts his hand on his arm. I only ask you to help him for my sake when I am no longer here. Again, it's a kind of like, it's almost like he's destined to no longer be here somehow. I'm going to put a question mark by that. Utterson heaved an irrepressible sigh. Well, said he, I promise. And he promises, despite the fact he doesn't like Hyde, to do as Jekyll asks. Now, I think the interesting thing there is, obviously, the irrepressible sigh shows his kind of frustration. But that ultimately, Utterson is a good man, a good friend, and he is willing to help. Like it said in the first chapter, he would happily be the last, the last good man in a downgoing man's life, and that is true in this short chapter. So I hope you managed to get all those annotations. That's the end of the video. Back to live, Mr. Owen.